Welcome to HSBC Global Viewpoint, the podcast series that brings together business leaders and industry experts to explore the latest global insights, trends, and opportunities. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with new episodes. Thanks for listening, and now on to today's show.
This podcast was recorded for publication on the 20th of March 2025 by HSBC Global Research. All the disclosures and disclaimers associated with it must be viewed on the link attached to your media player. And remember to follow us. Just search for the Macro Brief wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm Piers Butler, and welcome to the Macro Brief. The capabilities of modern artificial intelligence have evolved at a rapid pace, with things that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago becoming a reality. And such is the pace of development that it is even hard for experts to keep up. So how well do you know the world of AI? In a new report, McDonald, head of data science and analytics, has looked at some of the most common misconceptions about the technology. And he joins me in the studio. Mark, you're becoming a bit of a regular on the podcast. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
So before we get to these misconceptions, let's catch up on when you were last on the podcast. If I recall correctly, it was at the beginning of the year, and it was on the back of a report you had published summarizing the results of putting AI through its paces in following Fed pronouncements. And actually, I ended up in a state of shock because you also illustrated how AI could take that report and generate an entire podcast with human-sounding voices, and it sounded really convincing. So I guess that's a good place to start with the first misconception in your report. Will AI take my job? I'm worried. Should I be?
It's a great question, and it's probably the most common concern that we hear about AI. The list of things that AI can suddenly do really well is growing rapidly every day. And there seems to be a new announcement of something amazing that AI can do. And there is a natural concern when people see this about what it will take away from them. But for most people, we think this fear is overblown. AI is going to be an incredibly useful tool. We're going to be able to use it for all sorts of things. But what AI does is it learns to do narrow tasks, and it can't do entire roles. And so unless your role is very narrow, then it's more likely that AI will change the nature of the way that you work, but it's unlikely to take your entire job. And in fact, what we think is that the types of tasks that AI is likely to do first, they're often going to be the parts of your job that are not your favorite aspect of the job. It's generally going to be something a bit mundane and a bit tedious and a bit repetitive. AI will be fantastic at doing those things, and it won't get tired and it won't find them boring. And that should hopefully free up time for the sort of higher value aspects of people's roles, the things that AI can't do yet.
Or as our colleague James Pomeroy has argued on some of his research, maybe give you more leisure time.
Well, that would be nice. That does seem to be, a long wished for development that technology will give us more leisure time. I'm yet to see it in my own life.
So in total in your report, you identify 8 misconceptions, and we won't go through all of them, but let's focus on a few. Firstly, skeptics of AI often cite the term hallucination when saying how you can't rely on AI, at least not without a human checking the results. Is that valid? And in fact, we could also address the other misconception that you highlight, which is inconsistency. The inconsistency misconception, which is that AI is great, but say when you come to providing financial advice, it's not reliable or accurate enough.
Yeah, I think both aspects have a reasonable grain of truth in them. AI models are notorious for hallucinating, and the term is so.
What do we mean by hallucinations then? Give me an example, maybe.
Yeah, it's not just when it gets something wrong, but it's when it gets something wrong and it gives you a full statement in a very confident-sounding way. It doesn't display. Same way, if you ask a human a question, they don't know the answer. Even if they answered it, you'd probably be able to tell from the tentativeness of the way they responded that they weren't that sure about the answer. But AI will give very bold pronouncements in response to a question, even if the answer is completely fabricated. And this is definitely something that worries people. I think what we need to bear in mind is a few aspects, really. So one, it's not that humans are perfect. Humans make mistakes all the time too. We just don't call it hallucinating when somebody makes a mistake. And I think what's really going on is, AI models make mistakes in a very different way to a human. Humans make mistakes, but we've had a lifetime of experience in coming to terms with and understanding how those mistakes happen.
Oh, are we sort of saying that AI lacks common sense?
Well, it's not just that. It's just that people often view AI as behaving like a human, and therefore it must have error modes that are human. And if it doesn't, then it's broken. But actually, AI, it's not like a human brain, and many of the misconceptions in the piece often stem from a faulty picture that people have that these things have been trained to produce human-like output. But do they even think is a genuine question? But if the way that they think and learn is very different to the way that humans think and learn, and so the failure modes tend to be very different too. So I think that's definitely one aspect of hallucinations that we should bear in mind. I think another aspect of hallucinations is why do AI models hallucinate? There's no sort of a priori reason why that should be a thing. So these AI models, like large language models, are originally trained just to predict the next word in the sentence. So they're trained language models to produce plausible sounding sequences of words. The final step of the training is designed. It's generally a reinforcement learning process to turn it into a helpful chatbot. And what I mean here is, let's say you ask a question to an LLM, why is the sky blue? A perfectly reasonable continuation of that could be, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? These are all interesting questions. You wouldn't be happy with that if you asked your AI chatbot that question and that was the response it gave you. And so they've been fine-tuned to provide responses that people find helpful. And the way they do that is the model produces candidate responses and humans go through and rank them and say this one's better than that one. It turns out humans really love confident-sounding answers. Humans hate it when the AI model says, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. And they're like, rubbish! And so really, AI models are hallucinating because they're trying too hard to please us.
In a way, there's a similar issue on this point about consistency, because AIs are being perhaps judged too harshly. You expect the AI to always get the same answer, get it right, which is not necessarily the case with humans.
Well, yeah, I think the consistency answer is the concern that people have when you ask the same question to an AI model twice and get two different answers. And this is something that I think is unlikely to change even as AI models get better. So the hallucination aspect, it seems that bigger and better and newer models seem to have a tendency to hallucinate less than the early models. Whereas I think this consistency aspect will not change, because what AI is doing a good job of is replicating human performance in aggregate. And if it's a complex question on which humans could have a valid disagreement, then each iteration of the AI model, it's like asking a different human. And so, of course, if there's a diversity of opinions on this subject from humans, you're going to get a diverse set of responses from an AI model. Now, eventually, what's likely to happen here is that, particularly in the consumer space, AI models will learn about you as you interact with them. They'll learn what you like, and they'll learn your preferences and learn the sorts of things that are likely to make you happy. And obviously we've seen this with, say, search engines, where search engines, because they know so much about you, they're able to skew the search results to you. And that has lots of benefits, but sort of at an aggregate level, it's a bit problematic, because you can end up with people in their own little bubbles where they never hear the opposing side to the to various debates. A similar thing may end up happening with models, where they appear to be becoming much more consistent, but they're really just learning what you like and parroting back to you what you want to hear, which ultimately I think would be a bad development.
Plenty of challenges. What about creativity? That's actually a concerning one, because what you're saying is that it's wrong to think that AI can't be creative?
Yes, exactly.
Which is always kind of like AI is very powerful, but it can't be creative. That's the last domain that humans can preserve. But that's not the case?
I mean, the jury is out, but my feeling is that AI models probably will turn out to be genuinely creative. And my reason for thinking this is that the goalposts keep being moved here. And so it used to be that when the output of AI models wasn't great, then people were very easily able to conclude that, it's not very good here. And it's like, it sort of strokes your ego to think, well, I'm much... If if you are a creative person, you can think I'm much better than these AI models, and they're just producing AI slop, which is a term that people throw around a lot. But modern AI models, the quality of their output keeps getting better, and so on the language model side, we're already at the point where language models can convince people that they're genuinely human. And this is the classic Turing test, where you interact with an AI model via text.
And you can't tell whether it's a machine or a human.
Yeah, and with some recent academic work, it comprehensively, ChatGPT-4 comprehensively passed that. What was interesting is that in order to make it pass that test, they had to put instructions into the prompt to make the AI model be more colloquial and make spelling mistakes and use lowercase letters, because the main way people could tell that it was not a human was that it was too high quality.
Yeah, there was never any typos.
Yeah, and so I think in terms of we're definitely not yet at the point where an AI language model could produce a fantastic work of literature or a story that is up there with the very best human writers. It's not at that sort of superhuman level of performance, but it's much more creative than most people. I would not say that I am a particularly creative writer. It's far more creative than me. Similarly, the AI art generating models, there was a fascinating study with an experiment somebody did online where they got 50,000 people to go to a website and to try to assess whether they would show them an artwork and they'd say, is it generated by a human or generated by AI? And to score it as how much you like it. People could not tell the difference, and the AI artworks chosen were high quality AI artworks. The human artworks were artworks by really genuinely famous artists, some of which have truly stood the test of time. People couldn't tell the difference. Even people who pre-reported in the initial survey that they hated AI art still preferred AI art, in that the two favourite images that people were shown across the board tended to be AI generated. So it's now I think the analogy here is AI can easily replicate something in a style that it's seen before. But maybe it can't create that new style of art or that totally new category.
Not yet, anyway.
Yes, exactly. And so that's what we're waiting for. That's where the jury is out. But you can see what I mean about the goalposts have shifted. Yeah. Like 2 years ago, we were having this discussion.
You would never envisage that. So another misconception you highlight is about the reach of AI, that it will... some people think that it's only really impacting the knowledge economy, but you think that actually the reach will be much broader. Give us a sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously... it's very hard making predictions in this space because things are changing. And in fact, if we went back 5 years ago and we were trying to, suggest where the major developments in artificial intelligence would happen over the coming 5 years, we'd probably have been focusing on things like driverless cars or automation in factories and maybe developments in robotics. And actually, generative AI has come along and been so powerful and developed so quickly that really now people have this idea that AI is purely about the knowledge work economy. But all those other aspects of AI are still possible and are still developing. Driverless cars keep getting better. We keep seeing developments in robotics, and there are lots of developments at the moment where people are rolling modern AI models into robotics, in particular excitement about humanoid robots. And if those developments turn out as everybody hopes, then suddenly that's a whole new category of thing that artificial intelligence can do.
So when I was thinking about that question, suddenly I thought about the report that your colleague David Jose wrote, our disruptive technology thematic analyst, entitled The Big Tech Singularity, and asking the question, what if technological innovation accelerates exponentially over the next 20 years? I mean, listening to your answer, it kind of feels like that's kind of part of what's going on. I mean, could we sort of be dramatically underestimating some of the benefits?
Potentially. I mean, interestingly, that misconception in the note was written by Davey. The link is very direct there. I mean, I think there does seem to be a tendency with technology that people overestimate what it's going to do in the short term and how far it's going to develop in the short term, and underestimate the sort of cumulative exponential nature of the changes that happen over the longer term. I think it's called Amara's law. It seems to be like a general tendency for technology. So I think similarly that will play out will play out here. I think what causes a lot of sort of consternation with people is how quickly it's changing in the short term. At the moment, people are underestimating what it's going to be able to do in the short term, never mind in the long term.
Right. Let's finish on DeepSeek. We couldn't talk about AI without talking about DeepSeek. Feels almost too recent to be a misconception. Why is it referred to as the Sputnik moment? I think I'm probably old enough to answer that one. And why are people quoting Jevons paradox when they talk about it?
The misconception we were referring to with DeepSeek was really a misconception when it first burst on the scene, where because DeepSeek was able to be trained much more cheaply than other comparable models to which it had comparable power, then there was a sudden fear that maybe all of this investment in AI infrastructure might have been misallocated, and you might not need the same amount of GPU and processing and data centers and cooling technology that had been sort of baked into expectations.
And sorry, just to interrupt, but the Sputnik analogy was just to say somebody else has got that technology as well. Just like with Sputnik was a satellite from the Russians, and the Americans said, "Oh my God, somebody else has developed that technology."
Yes, I think the Sputnik analogy here is, obviously DeepSeek came out of China.
Yeah.
And, the reason that this sort of development is much more likely to come from somewhere like China is that because of the various trade complications going on between US and China, it's been harder for China to get access to cutting-edge GPUs. And so, necessity is often the mother of innovation. And so they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort cleverly designing things so they could use the GPUs they had access to more effectively. And I think the fact that that could easily have come out of an academic lab who was also similarly GPU poor and probably would have had less of a shock to the market if it had come from there. But I think up until that point, the AI theme has been so concentrated in US stocks that people were thinking this is really a US theme at the moment, and it's reminded everybody that there's a lot of very exciting AI work coming out of China.
And the point about the Jevons paradox is that although initially the interpretation of DeepSeek is, have we been overspending on AI in the US because you can do it a lot more cheaply based on the sort of DeepSeek technology, the reality is that if you make it cheaper, the demand will increase?
Yes, exactly. So I think the original Jevons example was with coal, where people were able to come up with coal furnaces that were much more efficient, but then aggregate coal use went up.
Yeah. Because
once it becomes cheaper and more effective, you find other ways of using it that hitherto would have been just not worth it. And so the efficiency doesn't mean that you spend less on it. In aggregate, you spend much more.
Yeah.
And that's the analogy here. It's, DeepSeek was able to train a very powerful model using much less GPU power than would have been expected using the traditional methods. But they open sourced all of this. They released the model, they released the code, they released a very thorough technical paper explaining how they did it. So now all the other AI labs can attempt the same thing. And because the model is cheaper and can be run more effectively, then it opens the door for people to use it for things that otherwise they might not have thought it was worthwhile. And so ultimately it probably does increase the ultimate demand for GPUs and compute and everything else.
Now, I made that prediction in the last podcast. We'll have you again because this is still a fast-moving environment. But I guess, like me, you must be getting ready to fly to Hong Kong to attend the Global Investment Summit, which is kicking off next Tuesday. There's a whole section of the summit devoted to new networks of innovation. In fact, you're hosting a podcast, aren't you?
I am, yes. I will be interviewing Isabel Mayer, the CEO of Zendata Cybersecurity. We'll be discussing the intersection between AI and cybersecurity, so it should be a fascinating discussion.
Indeed.
I'll be metaphorically on the other side of the table in that podcast.
Swapping roles. Okay, well, I'll make sure I listened into that podcast. But for now, thank you for joining us and safe travels.
Thank you very much, and likewise.
So just as we said, the HSBC Global Investment Summit is less than a week away. The event runs from the 25th to the 27th of March in Hong Kong and brings together delegates from across the globe to hear from renowned experts, political leaders, and decision makers. For those of you at the event, we look forward to welcoming you, and don't forget to drop by and see us in the Arts Research Cafe. But if you aren't attending, you can still get involved. We'll be posting a short video update at the end of each day on LinkedIn, where our economists and strategists will give their key takeaways from the conference. And you can join us for a special Live Insights event on the last day of the summit. That's the Thursday, 27th of March. I'll be in Hong Kong putting your questions to Janet Henry, Global Chief Economist, and Murat Olgun, Global Head of Emerging Markets Research. For more details on how to sign up, head to LinkedIn and search #HSBC Research, or email us at askresearch@hsbc.com if you have any questions or comments. So that's a wrap. Join us next week for a special edition of the Macro Brief, which will be recorded live from Hong Kong. So until then, thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us at HSBC Global Viewpoint. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with new episodes.